Hello and welcome to a new video on my channel. Today, I present to you the story, What If Luca the World Jumper Entered the Marvel Universe? I hope you enjoy this new tale. If you find this unique story intriguing, don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel so you don't miss any of my future videos. The air above the Afghan desert begins to shimmer as a three-dimensional rift suddenly opens up in space. As the rift expands, the silhouette of a young woman becomes visible within it. Her brightly glowing turquoise eyes stand out against her dark outline as she steps through the rift into a new reality. As she moves forward, her outline sharpens, revealing that she is wearing short leather pants and a black t-shirt. Her eyes continue to glow turquoise, and her short hair is snow white. Her face is exotically beautiful, while her body is marked with light muscles and scars. A ring made of black material streaked with golden lines hangs from her right hand. She surveys her surroundings in a moment of silence and realizes she is in a desert. "What world am I in, Atlas?" asks the young, elegant woman. "My lady, my research on the internet of this world called Earth indicates that you are in the Marvel Universe," responds a disembodied voice in her head. "What the hell does that mean? The Marvel Universe should be fictional. How can this possibly be real?" the elegant woman inquires, bewildered. "Lady Luca, my research shows that we are in the year 2008, and Tony Stark has just been kidnapped by the terrorist group known as the Ten Rings. This reality corresponds exactly to the Marvel MCU, explains Atlas. Atlas is Luca's masterpiece, a paratechnological intelligence capable of performing magic. He is Luca's assistant, aiding her on her journeys through the multiverse. Traveling through the multiverse may sound like a dream to many, but only as long as one can control where they land. Since Luca can only ensure she doesn't end up in a world where she would immediately die, it's not as thrilling as it initially seemed. Luca has been traveling through the multiverse for 5 years, visiting numerous dimensions and worlds. Most of these were either completely paradisiacal or so dreadful that she came close to death multiple times. Her worst experience was in a post-apocalyptic world where she had to fight for survival in an arena. Compared to these grim experiences, the Marvel world seems relatively peaceful. Luca asks Atlas where Tony Stark is currently located. "My lady, the billionaire Tony Stark is in the Afghan mountains to the north of you. To be precise, he is in a cave exactly 20 kilometers north of your location," Atlas reports in Luca's ear. With a thought, she teleports 18 kilometers north and then up into the mountains for a clear view. Luca looks down from the summit at the camp of the Ten Rings and reflects on how surreal the situation is. To her eyes, this world seems more real than the movies, even though Atlas, whom she trusts, confirms that everything is exactly as it is in the films. She observes the terrorist camp and knows from the movies that the guards rotate every 4 hours. She ponders how to approach Tony. She dismisses the idea of teleporting directly to Tony Stark, as this would surely startle him and create a commotion. Instead, she snaps her fingers and conjures a deep black portal into her pocket dimension. From this dimension emerges a bird made entirely of crystal. This bird is a golem, a magical creature composed of magic and dead matter. A golem typically has a core that functions as a sort of magical heart. However, this golem lacks a core, which means it cannot regenerate, but this is not necessary. The gentle golden energy flowing through the crystal is the golem's programming. As Luca instructs her paratechnological intelligence, Atlas, to thoroughly scout and map the entire terrorist camp, she hears a confirmation in her ear. The bird takes flight from her hand and becomes invisible in the next moment. The bird flutters through the terrorist camp, recording everything with ultrasonic sensors and mapping the entire area. Most importantly, it maps the cave network within the mountains. As Luca views through the eyes of the golem, she sees that Tony Stark is still working on the Mark I armor. This prompts her to consider whether it would be wise to intervene, as doing so might prevent the creation of the Iron Man suit she finds so fascinating. On the other hand, she is not entirely comfortable with the idea of Ho Yinsen dying if Tony Stark escapes. Consequently, she feels torn between the two options. Ultimately, she decides to intervene and help Tony Stark. Meanwhile, in the cave where Tony is assembling the armor, a glint catches his eye. When he turns around, he sees a small yet elegant crystal bird perched on the metal bars. The bird resembles a sparrow, except it is made of crystal and somehow still able to fly. The bird flutters its crystalline wings and silently flies over to Tony, landing on a table. Tony wonders if the bird might be a drone from the terrorists, but he quickly concludes that if they were monitoring him, they wouldn't just be staring at him, they would have intervened by now. The small bird opens its beak, and a female voice suddenly speaks, surprising Tony. Hello Tony, my name is Luca, and I want to help you, but I don't want to startle you, says the voice from the bird. Wow, what are you? Tony asks, with a mix of fear and curiosity. Well, let's just say I'm here to help. So please don't be frightened and inform Ho Yinsen that I'll be appearing in this cave shortly, Luca replies calmly. Tony Stark decides to inform his colleague about the crystal bird. His colleague arrives, sees the bird, and reacts with surprise. But in the next moment, the air shimmers and, with a blink, a young girl with short white hair and turquoise glowing eyes materializes in the room. A moment of silence follows. Luca breaks the silence, saying, I'm pleased to meet both of you. In the minds of the two men, thoughts race. The girl seems to be a mutant, given her ability to teleport. However, what truly perplexes Tony and Yinsen is how she knows things she shouldn't, like Yinsen's name, which Tony hadn't mentioned. While knowing Tony Stark's name is understandable, knowing an outsider's name and being aware of the armor construction is somewhat odd to them. Luca, with a calm demeanor, responds, I've been in a situation similar to yours before, trapped and in need of help. Perhaps that's why I feel some empathy, or maybe it's simply because I find your work intriguing. Either way, I want to assist you. Ho Yinsen, observing the interaction, furrows his brow and adds, if you're here to help, why not just teleport us out of here? Luca's expression remains relaxed as she replies, if I were to teleport you out, there's a significant chance you might end up arriving only halfway. It's a risk you'd probably want to avoid. Tony and Yinsen exchange uneasy glances. The thought of arriving only partially and potentially being cut in half is unappealing. Yinsen speaks up, we definitely don't want to take that risk. Tony, despite his skepticism, recognizes the potential benefits of Luca's assistance. Alright, we could use all the help we can get. Just understand that we need to be cautious. I'm still not sure how you know so much, but for now, we'll work together. Luca smiles, her eyes shimmering with determination. That's a wise choice, let's get to work. With Luca's assistance, Tony and Yinsen continue their work on the armor, with Luca providing crucial insights and ensuring that the project progresses smoothly. The presence of this enigmatic girl adds a new layer of intrigue to their already challenging task. Tony Stark and Ho Yinsen worked tirelessly alongside Luca, who, to their growing amazement, displayed an intelligence far beyond what they initially expected. As they screwed the armor plates together, Tony couldn't help but notice how effortlessly Luca grasped complex engineering concepts. She wasn't just following his instructions, she was anticipating his needs, suggesting modifications, and even pointing out potential flaws in the design. Hand me the torque wrench, Tony muttered, reaching out without looking. Before he even finished speaking, Luca had placed the tool in his hand. He glanced at her, and she simply smiled, her turquoise eyes glowing faintly. Luca shrugged lightly, just a hunch. Yinsen, who had been observing quietly, chimed in, you seem to have a lot of those. Luca gave him a knowing smile but said nothing more. As they continued working, the sound of footsteps echoed down the corridor, guards making their rounds. Luca's head tilted slightly, and then, as if on cue, she vanished with a soft shimmer. Both men instinctively froze, their eyes darting to the entrance of the cave. The guards passed by without incident, unaware of the hidden activities within. Once the danger had passed, Luca reappeared, the same way she had left, soundlessly, with a casual air, as if nothing had happened. Tony and Yinsen exchanged glances, their thoughts mirroring each other's confusion and curiosity. What do you think? Yinsen asked quietly once Luca was out of earshot. Tony rubbed his chin, his mind racing. I don't know, it's like she's reading our thoughts or something. And the teleportation, it's more than just moving from one place to another. She knows things, Yinsen, things she shouldn't. Could she be reading our minds? Yinsen suggested, though he sounded uncertain. Maybe, Tony replied, his tone darkening with suspicion. But that doesn't explain how she knows so much about this armor, or how she's able to predict when the guards are coming without even checking. Yinsen nodded, pondering the possibilities. She's not just a teleporter, that much is clear, but what is she then? Tony's thoughts were a whirlwind of speculation. Luca's abilities seemed too vast, too refined, to belong to just any mutant. He had heard of alpha-level mutants, powerful but not unstoppable. But Luca, she was something else. She's not an alpha, that's for sure, Tony muttered, more to himself than to Yinsen. She might be Omega level. Yinsen looked at him sharply. Omega, you think she's that powerful? Tony didn't answer immediately. His mind was calculating, analyzing every interaction he'd had with Luca. Omega-level mutants were rare, almost mythical in their power. They were mutants whose abilities were virtually limitless, able to warp reality itself in some cases. If she is, Tony said finally, then we're dealing with something, or someone, way out of our league. Yinsen swallowed hard. The idea of an Omega-level mutant helping them was both a relief and a terrifying thought. If Luca's power was as vast as Tony suspected, there was no telling what else she could do. As Luca rejoined them, her presence seemed to fill the room with an air of calm confidence. She picked up right where she left off, offering another insightful comment about the armor's structural integrity. Tony watched her closely, his mind still turning over the possibilities. Whether Luca was here to help them out of genuine empathy, curiosity, or some other motive entirely, one thing was clear: she was far more powerful and intelligent than she let on. And that, more than anything, made Tony Stark uneasy. As the three of them continued working on the armor, Tony Stark found himself increasingly bewildered by Luca's uncanny abilities. Whenever he needed a specific part or tool, Luca was already handing it to him, as if she could read his mind. More than once, he caught a glimpse of her holding a plain metal plate, only for it to somehow transform into a precisely shaped component in the next moment. He couldn't tell if his eyes were playing tricks on him in the dim light of the cave, but it was unsettling. Yet despite his growing unease, he was also immensely grateful. Without Luca's mysterious aid, there was no way they could have built two full Mark I suits in such a short amount of time. Every time they hit a snag, Luca was there, either with a solution or the perfect part in hand. Her contributions were indispensable. Once they finished assembling the suits, Tony wiped sweat from his brow and glanced over at Luca. He couldn't deny her a certain amount of credit. Her intervention had saved them both a lot of time and probably their lives. "You know," Tony said, a hint of admiration creeping into his voice, "if you ever wanted, I could build a suit for you too. It might not be as fancy as mine, but I'm sure we could figure something out." Luca grinned at him, a playful spark in her turquoise eyes. She stuck out her tongue slightly and tapped her temple with a fist. "Did you forget already? I can teleport anywhere I want with just a thought." Tony's eyes widened in surprise. Up until now, Luca had never mentioned the extent of her teleportation abilities. He had assumed she could only move short distances, maybe within a city or a small area. But to teleport anywhere in the world, that was a whole new level of power. "Well," Tony said, trying to keep his voice steady, "that's impressive." Luca's grin only widened, as if she knew exactly what he was thinking. It made sense now, Tony realized. With power like that, she didn't need armor. She could escape any situation in the blink of an eye, and that was likely why she had no fear of him exposing her identity. If she was truly an Omega-level mutant, there was little anyone could do to stop her. But whatever Luca was, and whatever her true motives might be, she had helped them. That much was certain. And in this cave, surrounded by enemies, Tony was willing to take all the help he could get. As they prepared to put the suits to the test, he gave Luca a nod of gratitude. "Thanks for everything," he said sincerely. "We couldn't have done this without you." Luca simply smiled and gave a small, almost shy wave. "Don't mention it, it was fun." Tony couldn't help but laugh at that. Fun. Building an escape plan in a terrorist cave. Luca was clearly unlike anyone he had ever met before, and as much as her abilities unnerved him, he couldn't help but like her. The three of them stood together, looking at the completed suits. Tony's mind was already racing ahead, thinking of the battle to come and how they would escape. But in the back of his mind, he couldn't stop wondering just who Luca really was, and what else she was capable of. With the plan set and the suits finally assembled, Tony Stark and Ho Yinsen prepared themselves for the final steps. They donned the Mark I armor, the crude but functional suits providing a sense of protection and power that they had lacked for too long. Just as they were about to make their move, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the cave. Tony's eyes narrowed as he looked at the entrance. He hadn't anticipated any interruptions at this point, but it seemed fate had other plans. The guards had noticed something was amiss, perhaps the extra footprints in the dirt, or the unexpected appearance of food supplies that hadn't been there before. Luca moved faster than Tony had ever seen anyone move. In a blink, she teleported behind the guards. What followed was a brief but brutal encounter. The sound of bodies hitting the ground was the only indication Tony had of the outcome. When Luca reappeared, her expression was grim. "They're dealt with," she said, her voice cold, but with a hint of regret. "We don't have much time now. I'll keep the rest of them busy. You two focus on getting out of here." Without waiting for a response, Luca vanished again, teleporting through the labyrinthine cave system with an efficiency that defied logic. She had a map of the cave system, a careful blueprint she had acquired earlier. Even though the layout was complex, the map guided her every step, ensuring she knew exactly where to go. As she advanced through the tunnels, Luca came across a couple of metal grates blocking her path. She placed her hands on the bars, her turquoise eyes narrowing in concentration. With a subtle shift in her stance, the metal began to morph. What had once been simple bars twisted and compressed, reshaping into two sharp, lethal blades. Luca gripped them, testing their weight and balance before moving on. Terrorists lurked around every corner, their weapons at the ready. But Luca was faster. Every time one of them tried to aim, she was already gone, teleporting to a different angle, disorienting them. When she finally appeared behind them, her newly crafted blades made short work of their ranks. At one point, she encountered a particularly large and menacing guard. Instead of engaging directly, she used her powers in a different way. With a simple touch, she altered the very composition of the ground beneath his feet. The man sank into the floor, his legs trapped as if the earth itself had swallowed him. With a swift kick, Luca sent him toppling forward, leaving him half buried and utterly helpless. As she moved deeper into the cave, the fighting grew more intense. More men rushed in, trying to overwhelm her with sheer numbers. Luca remained calm, her mind sharp as she moved from one position to another. When one of the terrorists raised his weapon to fire, Luca reached out and touched it. The gun crumbled into sand in his hands, the particles slipping through his fingers as his eyes widened in shock. Alchemy, Luca thought to herself, a small smile tugging at her lips. It's not as flashy as their powers, but it gets the job done. Alchemy had always been her secret weapon, a form of magic that didn't rely on energy blasts or elemental control but on the fundamental principles of matter itself. With it, she could manipulate the world around her, altering the structure of anything she touched. It was a colorless magic, unseen and unnoticed until it was too late. Luca continued to move through the cave, systematically dismantling the terrorists' defenses. She felt a strange sense of satisfaction as she watched their weapons disintegrate or their formations collapse, knowing that she was buying precious time for Tony and Yinsen to make their escape. Luca fought with a ferocity and precision that left the terrorists reeling. She darted through the cave, her movements a blur as she teleported from one spot to another, her mind calculating each maneuver with eerie accuracy. Her power allowed her to dismantle weapons with a mere touch, the guns and ammunition crumbling into dust as if they had never existed. Every use of her alchemy was a complex operation. Luca thought about how incredibly intricate it was to manipulate matter at such a fundamental level. Her ability to reshape objects required not only immense focus but also a vivid mental picture of the desired outcome. Without her exceptional imagination and willpower, she wouldn't be able to execute such high-level magic with the speed and efficiency required in battle. She appeared behind a heavy gun turret and, with a swift touch, distorted its metal structure. The turret's once precise and deadly aim was now useless, its components twisted into a chaotic mess that rendered it inoperative. Luca reappeared a short distance away and turned her attention to a nearby ammo box. With another focused gesture, she transformed the box into a massive clump of metal, its contents rendered inert and unrecognizable. As she continued her relentless assault, the sounds of clattering and breaking echoed around her. She knew that Heo Yinsen and Tony Stark were close, their exit from the cave imminent. The faint scent of blood and the eerie silence of the cave confirmed that the two had made their escape. In the midst of the chaos, Luca experienced a surprising rush, a thrilling sensation that surged through her veins. The adrenaline of battle seemed to ignite a part of her that she hadn't felt in a long time. She wondered if, since her time in the arena, she had developed a craving for combat, a kind of primal thrill that made her question her own nature. But there was no time to dwell on such thoughts. A sudden shift in the battle caught her attention. A terrorist aimed at her with a weapon. Her advanced intelligence system, Atlas, alerted her to the threat, allowing her to dodge the shot with practiced ease. She swiftly teleported behind the attacker and, in a quick, brutal maneuver, transported both herself and the man upward. The result was grim, only half of the man reappeared intact. The other half was left behind in the void, the man dead upon their return. The sight was brief and unsettling, but Luca had no time to ponder the horror of her actions. The fight raged on, Luca's alchemy and teleportation turning the tide in their favor. As Luca watched the battle wind down, she saw Tony Stark and his friend Ho Yinsen ascending into the sky in their newly acquired suits. Reflecting on the chaos she'd just navigated, she realized that some of the weapons could be useful. With a determined thought, she teleported to a missile that she hadn't yet transformed and opened a pitch-black portal to her pocket dimension beneath it. After gathering a few more weapons, she teleported back to Yinsen. Yinsen, noticing her slightly disheveled appearance, was still puzzled by the enigma of her powers and knowledge. Yet, he was relieved to have her on their side. Together, they trudged through the vast desert, with Luca regularly appearing to provide them with food or a shelter to shield them from the relentless sun. "I'm sorry, but I need to take down the tent now," Luca announced abruptly, not offering much of an explanation. With swift, practiced movements, she began dismantling the tent poles. In a blink, she vanished, relocating the equipment elsewhere. Tony Stark and Ho Yinsen watched, somewhat bemused by her actions. Just as Luca completed her task, they spotted a helicopter approaching in the distance. How Luca had detected it before they did remained a mystery, only deepening the suspicion that she might be an Omega-level mutant. The helicopter arrival. As they neared the helicopter, Tony Stark was greeted by his friend Rhodey, a high-ranking Air Force officer. The moment was marked by a mix of relief and exhaustion. Tony, though strained, was not dehydrated but bore a few burns. Luca and Yinsen, equally grimy but not noticeably worse for wear, accompanied him. "Who are your companions?" Rhodey asked, his gaze lingering on Luca with curiosity. "These are two people who saved my life," Tony responded. "Make sure they're treated well." Rhodey's attention was caught by Luca, the young woman with turquoise eyes and snowy white hair, who appeared just as worn but not unrecognizable. Her eyes, reflecting a timeless quality, gave Rhodey an unsettling yet profound sense of something beyond the ordinary. After a moment of silence, Rhodey signaled for them to board the helicopter. The flight was quiet, with little conversation between the occupants. They exchanged occasional glances, each lost in their thoughts. Meanwhile, in the Afghan desert. At the same time, a portal opened in the Afghan desert, conjured by the ancient sorceress. She sensed an unusual magical presence in the air, as if reality itself had been disturbed. It felt as though something was creating ripples in time. The time stone embedded in her amulet began to vibrate, drawing her attention. With a practiced gesture, she opened the amulet and gazed at the time infinity stone within. To her surprise, two white rings had materialized around the green crystal, symbols of something higher dimensional. Concentrating her will upon the stone, she felt an immovable barrier blocking any alterations to space and time. This unprecedented interference left her mystified. Although she could still glimpse possible futures through the stone, they appeared blurred and uncertain. The inability to resolve this anomaly weighed heavily on her, as she struggled to fathom a force capable of influencing such powerful artifacts with mere presence. As Tony Stark, Ho Yinsen, and Luca disembarked from the helicopter, they were met by Pepper Potts. As Tony Stark disembarks from the helicopter, he is closely followed by Ho Yinsen and Luca. Pepper Potts, visibly overwhelmed by the reunion with her boss, turns to Tony and asks about his two companions. Ho Yinsen, ever the gentleman, introduces himself warmly. Luca, standing out with her striking appearance, merely smiles and says, "I'm Luca." Her white hair and turquoise eyes are visible beneath her hood, which Pepper only fully notices after her emotional reunion with Tony. Tony quickly assesses the situation and, seeing Pepper's curiosity about Luca, decides he needs a plausible explanation. "Well, Luca was also captured by the terrorists along with me and Ho Yinsen. She was a huge help in our escape," Tony explains. Pepper, concerned for Tony's well-being, tries to persuade him to rest and return to the villa. But Tony is resolute and soon finds himself addressing a crowd of reporters. With a relaxed tone, he remarks on the difficulty of standing and suggests they conduct the conference seated. He then plops down on the floor in front of the podium and takes a bite of the burger Pepper has procured. Tony Stark, "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. I'm sure you're all eager to know what's been going on, but first, let's get comfortable." Tony sits on the floor and begins eating a burger. Tony Stark, "Now, let's get to it. The truth is, I've been busy, and I've had a lot of time to think. I'm not just here to talk about my armor, although it's a pretty big deal. I'm here to say that I'm back, and I'm better than ever. I've been through a lot, but I'm not going to let that slow me down." Reporter 1, "Mr. Stark, can you tell us more about your experience?" Tony Stark, "Sure, but let's keep it brief. I had a little trouble with some terrorists, but with the help of my new tech, I managed to escape. The details will come in due time. For now, just know that I'm ready to move forward." Reporter 2, "What's next for Stark Industries?" Tony Stark, "We're going to keep pushing the envelope. Innovation is key, and we're not slowing down. Expect big things from us. And now, if you'll excuse me, I have a burger to finish. As the press conference wraps up, Tony returns to his villa. He finds Luca lounging casually on the sofa. Now, with ample time to observe her, Tony notices the stark contrast between her serene demeanor and her formidable appearance. Her white, short hair sparkles like fresh snow, and her turquoise eyes have a mysterious, almost otherworldly glow. Her muscular build and numerous scars speak of a life filled with struggle, a stark reminder of the battles she's faced. Tony is struck by these observations, pondering why Luca, despite her ability to teleport, bears so many scars. He hesitates to confront her directly about these questions, but his curiosity is palpable. As he gives Luca a tour of his villa, he senses an odd familiarity in her reaction. It seems to him that Luca is not genuinely surprised by the luxury of his home, and he notices Pepper's interest in the bracelet Luca has been wearing. The bracelet, with its constantly shifting golden lines, seems to dance with light in a way that defies conventional design. Luca's reaction to the state-of-the-art laboratory is subdued, hinting at a level of knowledge and experience beyond that of a typical person, or even an alpha-level mutant. Despite Luca's insistence that she is not a mutant, no one in the house truly believes her. As evening falls and Luca falls into a deep sleep, Tony sits with Ho Yinsen and Pepper, speaking in hushed tones. Pepper, Tony, what's the deal with Luca? Is she really a mutant? Tony Stark, well, we've had some interesting conversations. Luca has abilities that go beyond what we typically see. She can teleport and manipulate matter. It's a lot to take in. Ho Yinsen, I'm not sure if those are all her abilities. From what I've seen, she's a powerful individual, but she doesn't seem the type to use her power for harm. She's been helpful and kind to us. Pepper, it's unsettling to think she might be an Omega-level mutant. Someone who can teleport and manipulate matter, there's a lot of potential for misuse. But why would she help us if she had ulterior motives? Tony Stark, exactly. There are still many unanswered questions. She's been a great help, and her intentions remain a mystery. For now, we can only speculate. Pepper, I can't shake the feeling that she's hiding something. If she can teleport anywhere, why does she need to stay with us? And why help us so readily? Tony Stark, these are all valid points. But until we have more information, we have to see how things unfold. It's getting late, so let's get some rest and revisit this in the morning. The group falls into a thoughtful silence, each lost in their own concerns as they prepare for the coming challenges. The next morning, Tony Stark, Ho Yinsen, Luca, and Pepper Potts gather for breakfast in the luxurious dining room of Tony's villa. The morning light streams through the large windows, casting a warm glow on the table laid with a variety of dishes. Tony, feeling refreshed, contemplates how best to approach the many questions he has about Luca and her mysterious abilities. As they sit down to eat, the conversation flows casually. Tony, with a determined yet respectful tone, decides it's time to address his curiosity. Clearing his throat, he finally gathers the courage to speak. Luca, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask you something. You don't have to answer if you don't want to, but, well, I'm curious about those scars on your arms and your stomach. Where did they come from? Luca, with her usual calm demeanor, takes a moment before responding. Oh, those scars are remnants from my time in an arena. It was quite a harsh place. Tony's interest is piqued. An arena? Which one? Luca shakes her head slightly. That might be something someone else can answer. What I can tell you is that my past hasn't been as rosy as it might appear. Tony, still intrigued, probes further. Then, why do you have such distinct hair and eye colors? Luca's expression softens, and she admits with a touch of vulnerability, honestly, I don't really know why. It's just the way I am. The group absorbs her answers in thoughtful silence. There's an unspoken understanding that while Luca's past and origins remain shrouded in mystery, her presence and assistance have proven invaluable. The conversation gradually shifts as they enjoy their breakfast, but the questions and curiosity about Luca linger in the back of their minds. Tony Stark led Luca and Ho Yinsen down into his underground laboratory, the heart of his technological playground. The steel doors slid open, revealing a state-of-the-art space filled with gleaming metal, flashing lights, and futuristic machines. Tony could see the excitement in their eyes as they took in the intricate gadgets and robotic arms scattered around. The room pulsed with creativity and innovation. So, here we are, Tony said, making a sweeping gesture. This is where we're going to design and build the Mark II suit. I haven't started yet, but I wanted to get your input before we dive in. Luca, her eyes growing wider with each new piece of equipment she saw, grinned. This is amazing, Tony. There are so many possibilities here.
Her enthusiasm was contagious as she began examining the machines, her hands running curiously over the smooth surfaces. Ho Yinsen nodded in agreement. An impressive lab, Tony. With the right collaboration, we can make the Mark II truly exceptional. He surveyed the various parts and tools, his analytical mind already working on how to best utilize everything. As Tony guided the two geniuses through the lab, explaining his vision for the Mark II suit, Pepper Potts watched the scene unfold with a mix of amusement and concern. It was clear that she now had not just Tony but two other brilliant minds in the house, both just as chaotic as he was. Luca was young, full of energy and enthusiasm, but also unpredictable. Her laid-back demeanor, combined with her obvious love of food and her ability to teleport at will, made her a constant source of surprise. Pepper thought to herself that Luca was a refreshing addition to this otherwise serious environment, but she couldn't ignore the fact that her constant teleporting in the lab could also pose a danger, both to the safety of the experiments and to Luca herself. How do I handle this? Pepper wondered. Luca seemed like someone who didn't like being confined to strict rules, someone who loved freedom and movement. Maybe she needed to find a way to channel Luca's energy in a more controlled way without stifling her spirit. Ho Yinsen was a different case. He was calm, thoughtful, and had remarkable patience, a contrast to Tony and Luca. Pepper admired his wisdom and experience. Pepper thinks she needs to channel Luca's excess energy. So she considers what she can do. This is all very interesting, but after we finish the plan for the suit, I want to go for a jog, Luca says casually. This surprises Pepper, as she wasn't expecting it. Pepper thinks for a moment and then asks if she could maybe join Luca on the jog. Yeah, why not? I don't see why you shouldn't come along, Luca replies, distracted as she turns her attention back to the hologram Tony Stark has activated to create his plan for the Mark II suit. While the three geniuses work on the plan, Pepper heads back upstairs to the villa. She knows she can't keep up with the level of conversation between them. She spends her day attending to her usual tasks. As the day draws to a close, to her surprise, the chaos she usually deals with is much less than usual. Tony Stark has a much better work routine now that two other brilliant minds are involved. Luca comes up the stairs with Ho Yinsen and Tony Stark, all of them looking a bit tired. Luca says she's now ready to go jogging. Pepper asks if Luca plans to jog in her current outfit. No, Luca says, snapping her fingers. For a tiny moment, just long enough for Pepper to catch a glimpse, all of Luca's clothes vanish, and new ones appear on her body. Tony hears Pepper say something and turns around, but at first, he doesn't notice anything unusual. Then he sees that Luca is wearing different clothes. It strikes Tony as a bit odd, but considering Luca's ability to teleport and manipulate matter, the thought isn't far-fetched that she could also change her clothes in this way. He decides not to dwell on it and turns back to go with Ho Yinsen into the living room to relax. He barely notices his assistant's unease, as he is focused on discussing the plan's details with Ho Yinsen. Hey, why do you do that? Pepper Potts asks. Simply because it's faster than teleporting somewhere else to change clothes. And besides, the odds of anyone else seeing it, apart from you, were close to zero. Plus, the human eye isn't fast enough to catch any relevant details during such a quick teleportation. It's impossible for anyone to see more than just skin color before I'm dressed again, Luca says casually, walking past Pepper. For Pepper, this was a bit overwhelming and confusing, but for Luca, it was simply more convenient. As she heads to the door, Luca asks offhandedly if Pepper even had enough time to see anything specific on her body. Pepper has to admit to herself that she indeed didn't have enough time to see anything more than skin color. Still, she wants to give Luca a little reprimand for doing such a thing so nonchalantly. However, Pepper also considers that she shouldn't say too much, knowing that Luca could simply disappear if she wanted to. In the end, she decides to just express a bit of her disapproval during the jog. Luca, who had spent many years alone, understands that her habits might come off as a bit odd. So she assures Pepper that she'll change somewhere else next time. From Tony Stark's villa, they jog along a path and then take a turn down towards the beach. The path winds down the cliffs in small zigzags to the shore, where the waves crash against the sand. There, the two women jog quietly and peacefully, surrounded by the sounds of nature, for a few kilometers along the beach before turning around and jogging back. The sun is setting as they make their way back, and Luca gets a pleasant idea. Hey, you go on ahead. I'm going for a swim, Luca says, and jumps into the sea. In a brief moment before she hits the water, her clothes disappear, and she splashes naked into the sea. She finds the water cold but refreshing. Luca's teleportation ability shows it can also be used for fun. She teleports herself several meters into the air and splashes back into the water. Pepper gets the impression that Luca is enjoying herself. Pepper considers whether to join her in the water but decides against it. She continues running, thinking that Luca can easily teleport to her at any time. Now that she has some time to herself, she reflects on Luca. The way Luca reacted to Tony Stark's plan to build a Mark II suit strikes her as odd. If she didn't know better, it would seem as though Luca knew things before they happened. The idea that Luca could know the future seems impossible and absurd. But Pepper can't shake the feeling that Luca knows more than should be possible. Suddenly, Luca appears out of nowhere, fully dressed, running alongside her, startling Pepper, though she doesn't show it. When she thinks about it, what just happened is another sign that Luca knows too much. Even with the ability to teleport anywhere in the world, it wouldn't explain how she knew exactly where Pepper was and where to teleport. Pepper thinks that even if Luca could explain this, it wouldn't fully account for how she knew where Tony Stark was being held by the terrorist group, the Ten Rings. It now seemed almost certain to Pepper that Luca knew far more than she should possibly be able to. Yet, despite her growing suspicions, Pepper decided not to confront her. Instead, she resolved to quietly observe over the next few days, hoping to uncover more by watching rather than asking. As time went by, Tony, Ho Yinsen, and Luca worked tirelessly in the workshop, constructing the Iron Man Mark II armor. The three geniuses collaborated seamlessly, though Pepper couldn't shake the feeling that Luca's insights were almost eerily precise, as if she was predicting the future rather than simply designing it. "Director, we've tracked down the girl. She's with Tony Stark." He hasn't given any clear explanation of who she is, only claiming that she was a fellow captive of the Ten Rings terrorist group, the young blonde agent reported, his voice tinged with disbelief. Nick Fury's one eye narrowed, immediately recognizing Tony's statement as a cover-up. Someone like her, a being with such extraordinary abilities, could never be truly captured. His mind raced as he recalled the reports, sightings of this young woman at various times in different, far-flung locations across the globe. The only plausible explanation was that she possessed the ability to teleport across vast distances. However, what disturbed Fury the most was that none of their highly advanced instruments had detected even the slightest sign of this teleportation. It remained a mystery whether she was truly teleporting or moving at speeds beyond comprehension. Just then, a dark-haired agent, practically running down the corridor, burst into the room. His expression was a mix of triumph and anxiety as he held out a tablet towards Fury. "Director, we've finally got evidence of her teleportation abilities," the agent exclaimed, his breath quick with excitement. Nick Fury took the tablet, his face a mask of stoic curiosity. The video played before him, showing a young girl with short, snow-white hair and striking turquoise eyes, casually enjoying a mango ice cream as she strolled down a bustling street in the Philippines. She moved with an easy grace, her presence almost otherworldly against the mundane backdrop of everyday life. As she turned into a narrow alley, the camera caught a brief flicker, barely perceptible, but unmistakable. The timestamp on the video indicated that mere moments later, the same girl appeared thousands of miles away, stepping out of another alley in a completely different city, still eating the same mango ice cream as if nothing had happened. The timestamp shows this occurred almost simultaneously on opposite sides of the world, the dark-haired agent explained. "When we slowed down the footage to its maximum, you can just barely see a faint turquoise light spreading from her eyes the moment she disappears." Fury's grip on the tablet tightened as he absorbed the information. "How is it," he began, his voice low and measured, "that with all the resources I've put at your disposal, you've managed to gather so little about her powers after 3 days?" The agent swallowed hard, understanding the weight of Fury's words. The mere idea of a mutant with such a formidable teleportation ability was unsettling enough, but there was something even more troubling at play. Fury's instincts told him that Luca's powers extended beyond just teleportation. If teleportation was her only ability, it wouldn't explain how she left so few traces of her existence. There was something more, something darker and more elusive. It's as if something, or someone, is actively erasing the digital footprints she should be leaving behind. "Every time we try to track her, the data is somehow scrubbed clean from the internet and every database we can access," the agent reported, a hint of frustration creeping into his voice. For a moment, Nick Fury remained silent, his mind racing with possibilities. The thought of a mutant capable not only of teleporting but also of covering their digital tracks with such efficiency was almost too much to believe. Yet, the evidence was undeniable. The speed and precision with which the data was being erased were beyond anything Fury had encountered before. Suddenly, a harsh, robotic voice echoed through the room. "Alert. Digital attack detected, firewall breached. Systems are being infiltrated." The lights in the room flickered ominously, plunging everyone into a brief moment of darkness before the backup generators kicked in. Nick Fury's mind raced. The timing was too perfect, too coordinated to be a mere coincidence. Someone, or something, was watching them, aware of their every move. As the lights stabilized, Fury knew that the situation had just escalated to an entirely new level. The game had changed, and now, more than ever, they needed to figure out just who, or what, they were dealing with.
And that wraps up today's video on what if Luca the World Jumper jumped into the Marvel Universe, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Also, don't forget to share my channel with your friends. If you click on the left side of the screen, you'll be taken to the latest video I've uploaded. And if you click on the right side, you'll find a playlist. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Until then, take care and goodbye.